Good afternoon. Welcome back to Advancing with Watercolor. Today we're going to dwell a little bit on color itself and some strategies for using color in relation to our motif. And color is a tricky subject. I find it's a hard one to teach too because so many things are involved. But I'm going to give some simple ideas on how to think and use your colors. A good source for color knowledge is the color wheel, primarily because it aligns the complementary hues. You can see purple aligns with yellow, orange aligns with blue, red aligns with green. These become useful tidbits to us when we're using color for dramatic effect. Here you see my palette, and it's aligned in some of the same way. Yellows at the top, reds at the middle, blues on the right, darker colors, blues and violets, and finally black on the bottom. And this is how my paint palette looks just after finishing the demo today. So I usually work from a pretty dirty palette. Watercolor in particular uses transparency to create hues. So when we layer colors, we get a third hue, and that third hue is usually a broken or a mixed hue, a gray, if you will, and we use a lot of this in watercolor. So this is our image for today. It's a photograph given to me by a student of the Cape Ann area. This is near Gloucester, Good Harbor Beach, Twilight, and we decided to do this as an exercise for color. So I'm going to employ the strategy that I was just mentioning of using opposites on the color wheel to complement each other and make the color more outstanding. I'm starting with the sketch, simple lines as you see, directional lines for my brush strokes, and isolating my center of interest, which is the small house in the distance. And we're going to do this painting in stages. 2 stages, an underpainting, which is going to allow us to create a gradient in the sky, starting with yellow ochre and carrying it up the page and diluting it while it's wet, dropping in a bit of cobalt blue. And since my board is at an angle, the color is naturally flowing down and blending by itself. This is a strategy that the watercolorist uses a lot to mix the colors. We do mixing with the brush as well, but this sort of graded wash, which we're using a lot in our work this winter, is created by using gravity. So my board is at about 35 degrees and allows that color to just mix so beautifully. I couldn't have done it better with my brush. And you notice I'm repeating it on the lower section, just in reverse, starting from a bit of yellow. Maybe I'm going a little darker blue in the foreground to make this come forward a little bit more. But it's the underpainting, and the scene is that we're painting a cloudy sky and a beautifully lit building at the beginning of twilight, and a lot of shadows and reflections in the sand in front. So this is the first stage, blue against yellow, and this blue is making that yellow vibrate a little more, have a little more color energy, and it's really the basis of the whole painting. From this basis, we introduce other elements. We're going to introduce some clouds using another broken hue or another gray mixed up of burnt sienna and a little bit of, ultramarine blue and a little bit of burnt sienna. That's what I'm using to create these clouds that you see. So it's a blue, it's a cool hue, but it's definitely a gray. In fact, most of the paintings I do rely on grays. Broken hues, it's another word for it. And what that does is it gives me flexibility with the hues. As long as I'm conscious and thinking about the temperature, I can contrast these hues and generate a more powerful, colorful effect. Very small part of this painting is going to remain sort of a pure hue. The face of the house will remain pure throughout the length of the painting, and I think at the end you'll see how that manifests itself and remains as a sort of jewel in the final painting. Adding burnt sienna to that still wet sky and the color feathers that way and gives me that soft glowing effect of trees at twilight. Very important this painting too. We're talking about color, but the brushwork and the sort of negative aspect of the sky against the clouds really creates a nice shape and draws us towards our center of interest. And that's my main reason for discussing color today, is how can we use color to generate or point to or illuminate, in this case, a center of interest. And contrasting hues, complementary hues, of the blue and the orangish hue, and contrasting temperatures, warm against cool. That's another strategy that I'm using in this painting. Let's say these are all grays, but you can tell that the sand that's being created now is a warmer gray, equal in tonality perhaps to the blue sky, but a warm gray. And this sort of contrast is what generates luminosity, glow, color, striking color, all those things combine. But in my mind as a painter, I don't try to replicate color as much as think of replicating the tonal value, the light or dark aspect, and the temperature. So this is our second application, and things have gotten much more interesting. Those shapes are very beautiful, but perhaps a little too dramatic for our expression of twilight. So we're going to play with that a little bit and certainly add reflections and refine these shapes. I would say that the sky is complete as it is now. I won't go back to it. This house, which remains at Good Harbor Beach, is a striking mansion. There's houses behind it, but this is the one that you notice above the trees, especially at low tide. You see it with more clarity. There's rocks to the side, trees behind, and it faces towards the western sky. So we get this wonderful glow at twilight, and that's what the student was trying to capture in her photograph, and that's what I'm trying to embellish on or exaggerate, because this is what we do. This is what I do in painting, is take the raw material and choose what I like about it and exaggerate it, for lack of a better word, to suit my interest in the scene. Twilight is my interest in the scene, so the state of the painting right now is quite dramatic, but it won't remain that way. There's going to be washes added to tone down some of the area. But my center of interest, the house, is the guiding post. It kind of tells me how to relegate edges, colors, and the drama of the scene, how to soften that and perhaps make it more subtle. I'm working into a dry area now with the reflection of the distant scene in the pools at low tide. So we see the trees reflected, we see the house reflected, and that causes a sort of a nice play of light, and it gives us a chance to exaggerate the color once again into the pool and make that sort of a double impact in the painting. When we're looking at a scene, when I'm looking at a scene, I generally try to think of what we call a mother color. I think that I've heard that term first from Joseph Zabukovic, and it's a very practical idea because we're just dazzled by color when we're in nature, and finding a base color, a color that kind of determines the mood of the scene, is very, very helpful, because that color will enter into all the mixes. In this case, I'm using a lot of cobalt blue, or in some cases a little bit of lavender, which is a derivative of cobalt blue, to create much of the color changes, and certainly in all of the grays I have a little bit of that. The only place that haven't used the cobalt blue is in the face of the house. And you can see as the painting's drying and as I'm going back in and refining some of the lights and darks, how that is effective to make that little jewel of the house just almost like a lighthouse. It's glowing. It's glowing for a couple of reasons. One is that complementary contrast of blue against orange or yellow. And a second reason is letting the yellow enter some of the local colors and spread outward. The same with the blue. The blue enters into most of the other colors. So that sort of feedback creates the glow as well. Watercolor is a fascinating medium because it allows for transparency, for the other underpainting to come through in a dramatic or subdued fashion. It's left up to the artist how much of that you want to show. In this painting, it's very important to have that yellow along the horizon behind the trees, behind the blue clouds that are gathering on the horizon. It's what's creating sort of the outward extension, the outward feeling of that golden light. And it directs the eye as well to the house and to the reflection. So I'm at this stage, the painting's nearly finished. I'm adjusting. You just saw me put a wash of blue into the water, a second wash. I felt the first one was not substantial enough. As I do this, notice how that light on the house is getting more and more compact, more and more intense. Small adjustments made to make our center of interest come out a little more strongly. And this is a fun but tricky part of the painting because it's easy to go beyond what you want to do. And once you do that, it's hard to recover. So here's the finished piece and fully dried. You can see how that house glows in the distance. There's an echo of that glow in the water in front. Everything around the corner is very soft, very subdued. There's a nice path of that golden light reaching to the house. The complementary colors, blue and orange or yellow orange, are used in this painting to, again, work in harmony with the center of interest and make it a more striking painting. So this is the finished work. I won't do more to this. And I hope you enjoyed this demo. Thank you.